10-minute rule bill. Luke Pollard.
I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to require the government to prepare a strategy for recycling out-of-service Royal Navy nuclear submarines and to report annually on progress, to consult on extending decommissioning powers in Part 1 of the Energy Act 2004 to include the recycling of Royal Navy nuclear submarines and to publish estimates of the taxpayer liability associated with such submarines and for connected purposes. Mr Deputy Speaker, every nuclear submarine Britain has ever had, we still have. There are 13 old nuclear submarines tied up in Devonport in Plymouth, and there are 7 tied up in Rosyth. When I was elected in 2017, I said I would make safely, securely and sustainably recycling these submarines one of my priorities. I have asked the Prime Minister 2 questions at PMQs about the lack of a funded plan to recycle these submarines. I've helped put together a cross-party campaign with the Honourable Member from Dunfermline and West Fife and the Honourable Member from Berwick-upon-Tweed. We have met ministers, submitted proposals, encouraged the questioning of the Public Accounts Committee, whose excellent report on this subject is also published today, and now we present our arguments and proposals in this bill. This bill has cross-party backing from a range of colleagues who are all as passionate as I am that these nuclear submarines are recycled securely and safely, and I'm grateful for seeing so many of them in the chamber today. Many people may not be aware that we still have all the submarines that we have had serve in the Royal Navy. The 13 in Devonport and the 7 stored in Rosyth are potentially just the start of many more to enter storage. The oldest submarine stored in Devonport is HMS Valiant, which was launched in 1963 at the height of the Cold War. You can actually see these submarines on Google Maps. So if you're watching at the moment, zoom into Plymouth, and on the left-hand side of the city, at Three Basin, Devonport, you'll be able to see lines of nuclear submarines, many of them there for decades. Mr Deputy Speaker, it would be easy for me to make for cheap headlines by saying that there is a safety risk of these nuclear submarines, but populism is not my style, so I want to be clear that there is no immediate safety risk to our local communities from these submarines. Babcock do all they can to look after these submarines, ensuring that there's no leaks and no risk to our communities, and I thank them and the staff that do it for their work. But Plymouth and Rosyth cannot be asked to look after these submarines indefinitely without a plan for their disposal. Now, this is a personal matter for me, as the son of a submariner who served on the HMS Swiftsure and HMS Conqueror and worked on the refitting and extending the operational lives of many of these submarines as an engineer in Devonport. My family know these subs well. It's a point of curiosity not lost on my old man that one Pollard served on them and his son is busy trying to chop them up and dispose of them. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, both Pollards are doing so in what is in the national interest. We already have a civil nuclear programme dealing with the clean-up of our civil nuclear past. The tax-funded Nuclear Decommissioning Agency is working on clearing up 17 old nuclear sites, but their work does not currently cover decommissioned nuclear submarines. The taxpayer has an unlimited liability for the clean-up, as clearly stated in the 2004 Energy Act, and rightly so. We know that 9 of the 20 submarines retired since 1980 contain nuclear fuel, which aren't a risk currently, but do need to be dealt with. My bill seeks to prepare the ground for the extension of that unlimited taxpayer liability from civil nuclear clean-up to include these old Royal Navy submarines. If we extend the line of credit from the Treasury, work can begin and we can genuinely deal with our nuclear legacy. Now, these submarines are not only taking up valuable space in our dockyards, but they're costing the taxpayer millions of pounds a year in storage and maintenance costs. The Public Accounts Committee have today released a report which puts the cost at the taxpayer at £30 million a year. This money could and should be used for dismantling and defuelling those submarines and finally dealing with these retired boats. The report warns the MOD are reaching a crisis point in terms of space. It says that the MOD will run out of space to store these submarines by the mid-2020s. In the next 4 years, 3 more Trafalgar-class submarines will need to be stored somewhere as they are replaced by the new Astute subs being built in Barrow. The PM told me in this chamber they will be stored at Devonport, taking our number of old retired submarines up to 16. A decade later, The 4 Vanguard-class Trident subs will need to be stored when they're taken out of service and replaced by the new Dreadnought-class submarines. But where will they go? There's no space at Devonport, and Rosyth is closed for any more submarines. That's why we need a funded plan to deal with the ones we have, to make space for the ones that will be coming out of service soon. Instead of further delaying this decision, it's clear that we need action now from government. Now, I know Rosyth has plans for the dock space currently used by these submarines, and in Devonport, I want 3 Basin to be used to enhance the baseporting location for the brilliant new Type 26 frigates we'll be getting, and hopefully the Type 31 frigates in due course. Over a year ago, I helped kick off this campaign with colleagues from all parties. We wrote to the Prime Minister, urging her to fund a defuelling and dismantling strategy. These submarines won't go away on their own. And although they've been hidden out of sight for many, many, many years, the longer this recycling project drags on, it becomes more and more expensive to deal with those submarines. Right. Retired submarines have been ignored by governments of all colours for now over 50 years. They need to be dealt with properly, and it's an issue that I think all our parties can unite on to secure a safe and decent future. A properly funded defuelling and dismantling strategy, broadly submarine recycling, would present opportunities to invest in skills and innovation. It would also foster greater collaboration between the defence and the civil nuclear sectors. The workforce already moves between these sectors, as does the science of decommissioning. But at the moment, the government still deals with them in 2 very distinct silos. There is an efficiency for the public purse in collaborating, and the future really must be more joined up. That's both at the ministerial level, to the official level, to the work on the ground and in the docks. Decommissioning is a highly skilled and technical work which creates good jobs and supports the local economy and community. Mr Deputy Speaker, above all, recycling these old nuclear submarines is in the national interest. Plymouth and Rosyth cannot be asked to store old nuclear submarines indefinitely. That is why we need a properly funded plan for these submarines using the same principles as the civil nuclear clean-up programme. Because these submarines must be recycled safely, securely and sustainably. Now, I know once people find out about these submarines, they are concerned about what will happen to them. But we also know that once you've seen those submarines, be it on Google Maps, in person by driving alongside the docks in Devonport and Rosyth, or on the warship tours along the dockyard in Devonport, you then have no choice but to think about what should happen to them. What should happen to those submarines? And that's why, on behalf of my colleagues from Berwick-upon-Tweed and from Dunfermline and West Fife, I present this bill as part of a campaign that will not rest until we win, to highlight these subs and demand politely but firmly that a solution is found. Mr Deputy Speaker, we need to acknowledge that these nuclear submarines exist and need to be dealt with. We need a proper plan from the MOD for recycling the submarines with a clear time frame, and we need to extend the unlimited taxpayer liability to ensure this essential work can be delivered. That is what my bill will do, and that is why it has cross-party support, and I hope ministers will pick it up and run with it. Thank you.